And I think, really in these films, it doesn't matter how good your special effects are. The thing that sells the experience to the audience is when they see the actor. And if they believe when the actor sees the thing that they are really seeing it, and then they're sold that that it's really happening.
How are you both doing today?
We're very well.
Very good.
I gotta say, Unwelcome was quite the treat. It was a bizarre little twist on the home invasion genre almost. And John, I will come to you first. What about the project really attracted you to want to get behind the camera for it?
Well, I suppose I've been seeing a lot of the recent wave of horror films, from people like Ari Aster and Jordan Peele. And I was just starting to get excited about horror again, and really, I suppose for me, the sort of the point where I was least in love with horror as a genre was around the kind of Hostel Saw time. And I was starting to think, maybe horror is not really my bag anymore, which was a big statement for me. And just the recent wave of the films that they are definitely horror movies, they're definitely in the genre. There's no question about it. And they deliver everything that you expect of the genre. So you have the thrills and the spills and the blood and guts and the scares and all the things that we know are part of a horror movie. But at the same time, they had very believable performances. They had something to say about modern life, something interesting to say about how we live, about society, about what it is to be alive in the 21st century. I just thought, these are good movies. And I really started getting the itch to make another one.
I love all horror, but I definitely have enjoyed seeing a move away from the Saw and Hostel type films in recent years. And then Douglas, I'll come to you next. What about the script and the project really spoke to you to want to be a part of it?
I just really loved the script. Everything that the film builds to be was on the page, and it was very well drawn. I thought the characters were interesting. I liked that it had a very strong female at the center of it. And I kind of chuckled to myself figuring out how I was going to play this completely useless guy but a guy that you still need to sort of feel for and go with and believe in. And the audience need to go with you on that journey. So I thought it was an interesting challenge. And I'd also never made a horror movie. And I just thought it sounded fun. I mean, when the Red Caps just started tearing the shit out of everything, I was like, "This is great," and I found it very funny. It made me laugh. I thought it had a very interesting sense of humor that I hadn't. And I'm not a huge horror watcher, but I hadn't really. It felt original to me. I hadn't seen anything like it at all, or read anything like it, and. I had conversations with John, and we got on, and I liked his work, and we went to work.
I think what Doug did, which I'm extremely proud of and grateful to him for, is the character Jamie is a coward, and I don't think it's an insult to the character to say that, because I would say the same thing about myself and my co-writer Mark Stay. That's how the film was born. But Doug really played it honestly, what it is to be frightened and what it is to be scared and what it is to be overwhelmed by fear in a situation where your life is threatened. And I think a lot of actors wouldn't have done that. I think it takes, perversely and ironically, it takes a hell of a lot of courage to play a coward. Doug did that. He did it honestly and truthfully. And he didn't, I was really expecting on the day that we shot certain scenes that, maybe he would come to me and say, "Look, what if I throw a punch? What if I do this? What if I did just a little bit more heroic? What if something, what if he doesn't quite come at me in the way he does? Just start to twist it a little bit and just build back in a bit of, ego into it." And he didn't want to do that at all. He was very much like, let's go to the heart of this and let's really show people what this is like. And I think the film's really... I think his character is really interesting and different as a result of that.
So with those elements mentioned, then I was curious to hear, Douglas, what you felt were some of the biggest keys in helping balance this, sort of weaker character with someone who is likable enough that the audience wants to relate to?
Yeah, I think it was, as John just said, it was about remaining honest. It wasn't playing it. It wasn't playing it. I wasn't playing a coward. It was truly trying to examine what I could potentially be like in that situation. You know, we all sit there with friends. Oh, what would you do if this happened? You know, I'd be the one that, you know, rescues the person, or we don't know. So I explored the parts of my brain that went to that place of fear and anxiety more, while trying to do your best. And he does his best. He does his best, and he doesn't just roll over. And you know, he doesn't just roll over. He fights as much as he can, but at key times, it's her that stands up and is his great protector. And I have that in my relationship now. My fiance and I, we're in this amazing relationship, and she stands, you know, I believe that she's got my back as much as I have her back. And it's an amazing feeling. And it was kind of, I don't think that's has been portrayed as much in film. I love that she was the alpha in that relationship.
I did love that dynamic between them. And what better way to bring that dynamic to life than Hannah John-Kamen, who, I mean, has just been incredible in everything. And so, John, I will come to you next for that question. What was it like searching for the perfect person to pair alongside Douglas for this role?
Well, I think we were very lucky to get Hannah. The same thing with Doug. I think she just really responded to the script and saw the potential in the film. And I have to say, I mean, I knew she was a good actress before I worked with her. Obviously, that's why we cast her. And, you know, I was very, very much looking forward to working with her, and I knew she was great. But I guess what I saw when I worked with her on set is how she really is the real thing. You know, she's the real deal. And I thought, okay, this is, you know, maybe a star of tomorrow. And I think that's already started to be proven. But she really is special, and every day she would do something on set that would surprise me or blow me away, or just the way that she committed to a film that on paper is a kind of a bit of a, you know, it's a hokey creature feature. There's definitely a version of this movie which I don't think we've made, which is a bit goofy and a bit, you know, schlocky. We tried to make an A movie out of a B movie subject matter, you know, and Hannah really is part of that, and Doug as well. But
she's also really nice. she's just a really nice person. She's really easygoing. She has little ego, and we worked very effortlessly together instantly. And we didn't even have a huge amount of time to spend together before, but on set we were just a great team. And John was a very sensitive director that I think brought out the best of us.
That's wonderful to hear. And that actually answered my next question. So I appreciate that. So then, John, I will come back to you. You mentioned about the almost schlocky version of this film that could have existed. And this is definitely a film and a concept that needs the right tonal balance. So I'm curious what that was like for you, walking that fine line to really make sure you were hitting the higher ambitions that you had with this sort of unique concept.
Yeah, well, I like creature features, and I like gory films and violent movies, and I like films that have far-fetched concepts, but I like them to be played straight, and I like them to be done for real. And so I guess that's the tightrope we had to walk. And I suppose there's two other versions of the film on either side that we could have been seduced by. So you could have been kind of drawn into the more goofy, comical elements of the goblins, and there's things that they could have done that would be tempting, that would kind of bump you out of the reality of the film. And equally over here with the story the thing that happens to Jamie and Maya, Doug and Hannah, is, you know, there's a version of that which is quite dark and morbid, and, you know, maybe even bleak and a tiny bit depressing, you know, almost like a gritty, real version of that story. And I didn't want to go there either. You know, it's really important to me that the film is entertaining and that you're on a bit of a roller coaster, you know, and it takes a while to get up to the top. I mean, there's a lot of things to enjoy on the way up, but once it gets to the top, you know, you really do drop. And I think it's quite an intense sort of final third, very intense, really.
we've talked a lot about your love of film influencing this. I can even see some of your collection background there. So I'm curious if you looked towards any specific films for inspiration, be it for the tone or for the creation of the goblins or anything like that.
Gremlins is a big influence on this movie. And there's another film, which I don't know if you remember, called Cat's Eye, which is an 80s Stephen King film. And the final installment of that with Drew Barrymore, where she has a little goblin breaks into her bedroom and steals her breath. And that always stayed with me. And the thing I love about that film is they built giant sets for that goblin. So he comes out and he comes through a hole in the skirting board, and they basically just built a big skirting board. And they had a shorter actor, but he was a full-grown adult, and he had a costume on. And he comes out of a skirting board and he gets on a roller skate, I think, and he maybe gets in a fishbowl or something like that. All these things were giant. And so that's the way we did our goblins as well. We built double height sets. So that goblin who comes into Jamie and Maya's house and he reaches up to the door in the French windows at the back of the living room, those doors are 12 feet high as opposed to 6 feet high. And he really is reaching up. And that's a stunt performer in a costume, but he's wearing a mask sculpted by a brilliant creature designer called Sean Harrison, and it's a static mask. One of the things that I didn't really like about some of those old 80s creature features is when you get into those close-ups, and this is true of Gremlins, which is a film I love and is a big influence on this, but when you get into those close-ups, the faces are a bit static and a bit rubbery, and when they blink, the eyelids don't really move quickly enough, and so they don't really look very real. So we had an actor called Rick Warden, who's an old school friend of mine from years back, and he played the faces and the voices of the goblins. We motion captured his face, recorded his performance. He did loads and loads of different takes, different ways, different improvised, all kinds of things, and then that was animated back over the masks. So we photographed the goblin masks, and then the CG guys used that as a very specific reference. That's how it's supposed to look. And then they did an animated version of the mask, and they put it back over, tracked it back over the mask. So I think you've got a kind of very interesting marriage of two very old-fashioned and very new techniques. And for me, it gives you a really great effect where they look like, when they're fighting and when they're walking and interacting, that they've got gravity, that they've got weight. I think sometimes in modern movies, CG creatures, which often are amazing, but sometimes in the wide, you kind of see that they don't really have the right gravity, and they're kind of bouncing around, and just something instinctively tells you that they're not really there. And I think with this, you can see that they're really there. And a lot of people have struggled, I think, to break down how we've done them, and they think, oh, they're puppets. They're just very sort of sophisticated puppets. There's a lot of talk about, Jim Henson and things like that, which to me is a compliment. So
they are up to the level of Jim Henson creature shops, only they're real. So kudos to you on that. So then, Douglas, I'll come to you next. What is it like having to act in a scene like that, where there are all of these elements that you have to keep in mind and imagining these red caps as they attack you?
It's a challenge for sure, and I've always had nightmares about imagining having to act to a tennis ball, going to set and just not being able to do it. You just wake up in a cold sweat, thinking, "Oh no!" But it didn't. It didn't feel like that. Because also you had these these goblins running around with masks who weirdly they were like on a whole B unit shooting a whole bunch of fighting and jumping on things, and so weirdly I had a visual. We had already had, and their masks were around, and so in my head, in my imagination, we had a very specific idea of what they were going to look like. So that was useful. And then I think once you get into a mode in your head where you're being attacked or you're in a fight or flight state filming, you're hallucinating at some point. You just imagine, it's quite easy to imagine it there, and it wasn't that much of a challenge, I guess. It was you got used to it quite quickly. The worst thing was trying to hit the bloody things over the head with a frying pan. I just remember having this cast iron frying pan and nearly ripping my shoulder off because they're so low. I was like, get right down low. They were really small. It's hard buggers to hit.
I had all these additional things which I was going to show to Doug and Hannah, you know, pictures, concept art, and things that I'd held back. So when I would show them, they would have a fresh image in their minds. But actually, I didn't really need that stuff because they were both very good at imagining the creatures being there. And I think, you know, really in these films, it doesn't matter how good your special effects are. The thing that sells the experience to the audience is when they see the actor. And if they believe when the actor sees the thing that they are really seeing it, and then they're sold that that it's really happening, you know. But I always felt when we came in for those big close-ups with Doug and Hannah that they really believed, you know.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I think both of them did an incredible job, as did you, John. I think people who give this a shot are going to really enjoy it. And I know I look forward to spreading the word about it. So thank you both so much for taking the time to chat. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks so much for taking the time. Thank you.
Thanks for your support. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a good rest of your week.